Hey guys, it's Kevin and finally here to review the first season of the new Apple TV Plus series, Severance. And this show, we follow a bunch of different characters, and all of them work in this place called Lumen Industries. It is this tech corp of sorts, and they also have all signed up to be a part of this thing called the Severance Program. It is this program that is very well known, where basically it separates, somehow finds a way to separate their memories with their non-work memories to the point where once they go to work, all of the memories leading up to it have pretty much faded away, and vice versa. When they exit work, they do not have, and they turn into their Audi, they have no recollection of what they did during the workday, and this is a process, like I said, it's very well known to pretty much everyone. But as the show goes on and these characters start to get deeper into it, we start to see that there might be a much darker conspiracy that is going on here that might be the reasoning for why this program is actually in effect. And like I said, the ensemble for the show is so unique. Like, this is a group of actors I would never expect to work together. Yet they do, and I think that's one of the reasons this show succeeds as much as it really does, because everyone really does kill it in this show. I don't think there's a single false performance in the bunch. Let's first talk about Adam Scott, because this is an actor that I've always really enjoyed. I think that he is very likable, very charismatic in that way. But most of the time, he's either playing, you know, this, like, funny guy that's, like, super genuine and, you know, he's kind of, like, taken advantage of and things like that. Or he's just playing an asshole. Like, that's usually the kind of character that he tends to play. He normally doesn't get to play the starring role in a show, and this show proves that he is very much overdue, because Scott really does get to finally have this vehicle to show his true potential as an actor. Mark is an excellent character, and part of that is due to how Scott really does play him, which is distinctly different from the innie and the outie version. The innie version is very workmanlike. He is very serious in that way. He puts a lot of care into his work. Whereas the outie version is a lot more emotional, and as the show goes on, we start to see these two sides really converge, and I think Scott just did such a great job at really playing such a multifaceted character, someone that you really become more and more drawn to as the show goes on. I think, you know, every episode I found myself getting more increasingly attached to him, and I think a lot of that was due to Scott's betrayal. There's so much that he is able to do, and I think this show proves that when he's given the right role, he really can be such an excellent actor, and I really love what he ended up doing. He was both incredibly charismatic, but also very emotional in the way. I thought he had a perfect balance between both of them, and I was just very impressed by what he ended up doing in this show. But I gotta say, for me, there are lots of very talented actors throughout the show, but the big standout for me might just be Britt, who plays the character of Helly. I've never really seen her before this show. I'm sure she's done, you know, roles, and I'm sure she's done a good job in them, but this is really, like, the first major thing I've seen her in, and she is spectacular in this show. I loved what she ended up doing here, and this is a character, you know, the character that she's playing is someone who is so unknown to this environment, and she really kind of, like, succumbs to the hostility of this world very early on. I mean, we can see from the beginning, she doesn't really want to be a part of Lumen. She's kind of, like, thrust into it, and the way that Lauer goes about portraying this character is so well done here. This is such a emotionally complex role, and there's so much material that she needs to deal with. I can't really get into it without delving into spoilers, but every single beat she just portrayed perfectly, and she really did end up being, I think, the character that I was invested with the most as a result, and I think a lot of that is due to Lauer's portrayal. It's so honest. It honestly feels the most human out of everyone. I feel like she's the person that you're going to find yourself relating to the most, and I really loved what she ended up doing here. I thought, you know, there were a lot of great performances in the show, but for me, she might just be the big standout out of everyone. But really, this entire ensemble, I mean, you know, you talk about an actor like Zach Cherry, who starts off and he's kind of like the comedic relief of this show. Dylan is someone who he likes to think of the, you know, positives of the company. He's always looking for like rewards and things like that. He's constantly talking about this this like pie he's gonna have, and as the show goes on, you know, we start to see him become a lot less humorous in that way. There's a lot more going on with him, and I thought that he was fantastic in the show. John Turturro was a really big standout here for me. I loved what he did here as the character of Irving. I can't get into much of what's going on with him, but he was great. Christopher Walken was fantastic, but the other two really big standouts of the show, first of all, is Tramell Tillman. My God, I mean, this guy, again, another actor I really have not seen that much of before. Again, I'm sure he's had, like, you know, like, bit parts and things like that, but I don't think he's really been, like, a front and center character like he is in this, and it's a damn shame because he is such a dynamic actor in the show. I mean, Milchick is someone you are so equally intimidated by, but also just as, like, you're so intimidated by him, but you are equally as intrigued. And it's because of the way Tillman really plays this character. He plays him with such a, like, subtlety that I just really loved in the show. There are times where you're really going to dislike this character, but then there are times where you want to know more about him, and I loved what he ended up doing in the show. I think, you know, he kind of plays the supervisor of sorts, where we all have that supervisor at work that we just can't stand, that is just constantly getting in our way, always trying to put us down. That's very much Milchick's character, but yet there's something deeper at the surface, and Tillman really does dive into that very well here. But also, Patricia Arquette, holy shit. I mean, I always say this, when Patricia Arquette has the right role, and she can really sink her teeth into it, she is one of the best of her craft, and this show very much does prove it. Harmony Cobell is the kind of character she was born to play. I mean, this woman is so infuriating to watch, and someone you are going to be so annoyed by. But my God, Arquette is just brilliant here. I love what she ended up doing in this show. You really do get a sense of, you know, what her entire motive is here, what she's really trying to do, and I really loved what Arquette ended up doing throughout the show. I think, you know, she has a very tough role to pull off here, especially when we get into the Audi version of her. There's a lot more going on with that, and I just really loved what she ended up doing. Like I said, I think this is one of the roles that Arquette was really kind of like born to play, as is everyone here. I think everyone really does bring something to the table. I think this entire ensemble, everyone is so talented here for many reasons, but it's easily one of the most, I think, talented of its kind for sure. It's such a multifaceted group of actors, and I think everyone really did just rise to the occasion. There's so much that is being asked from most of these actors, and all of them just do it with flying colors. I was so just, like, impressed by everyone here. All right, but now we have to get to the directing in the show, which is so interesting to talk about. I would have never thought that someone like Ben Stiller would create a show like this. He directs the majority of these episodes. When he's not directing, it's from someone named Aof McArdle. I'm not necessarily familiar with their work or anything like that, but obviously Stiller, you know, he's mostly known for doing like comedies or sometimes like very dark like dramedies of sorts, but never really seen him do something quite like this before. And my God, I mean, he just really committed to this show. I think that there is so much in terms of atmosphere that he brings to this show. From the beginning, there is such a, like, unsettling and off-kilter feel from the second you're entering Lumen Industries. Something just feels off, and I think Stiller just does such a incredible job with that here, because, you know, while this show is very dark, and at points it's generally horrifying the more that it goes on, there still is, like, this sense of dark comedy in this show, and the way that he's able to maintain all of that, I think is just so impressive to watch, and that's part of the reason the show sticks out as much as it does. This show is such an interesting sort of feel to it that I feel like is very incomparable when you think of, other shows of its kind. It's so distinctive in its approach, and I thought that's something that he just did an excellent job with here. And same with Aoife McArdle. Like I said, I mean, she really does bring a lot to the table here as well. I think both of them complement each other very nicely. I like that they're the only ones, like, directing the show. It's both of them are kind of working, like, in tandem in that way, and I'm not sure who was responsible for what. But I think overall, this show just really just has such an interesting sort of energy to it. It's so creative when it comes to the directing, and I just really love what Stiller is trying to get at here. He really is, like, trying to branch out and do something different, and I think, teaming up with someone like Aoife McArdle just really shows how much more seriously we should be taking him. It's not like we haven't. I've always loved Ben Stiller, but I just didn't know that he was capable of, creating something like this, especially something this different, this, out there. I thought that he just did such a incredible job with that. So I think the directing here is fantastic. There are so many moments that are so unsettling to watch. I was honestly surprised by just how intense this show really did get. There were so many moments that had me on the edge of my seat. There were moments that had me, like, almost in a puddle of tears with how emotional it was getting. And then there were moments that were honestly very funny to watch. So again, there's so many different things this show is trying to do, and it nails every single one of them. And I really do think it's due to both of these directors just really being so committed to what they're doing, and I thought they both just did such an incredible job. But we got to talk about the writing here, mostly from Dan Erickson. There's a couple other writers that are involved, but holy shit, I mean, this show is so brilliantly written. What I really do love about this show is that we really do take the time to zero in on each of these characters. Obviously Mark is the main focus here, but kind of as a co-lead, Helly is as well. I would say both of them are kind of co-leads for a little bit. And I think the way the show, really delves into their plight and kind of showing that contrasting how they are in, as an Audi, I think is very interesting to watch. Now, we primarily focus on Mark when it comes to the Audi portion of the show, but I think the show just does a really excellent job with showcasing how each of these characters really do work. Like I said, Mark is someone who he takes things very seriously. He puts a lot of pride into what he does. He doesn't really want to think of anything else but work, but as the show goes on, you can see that really does start to get to him. He kind of starts to question, like, why is this all I'm focusing on? Why, are there things that have been kept away from me? Are there things that are more important that I should be thinking about? And I think that's what makes that character so intriguing in that way, is that he always, the more the show goes on, the more Mark starts to kind of, like, branch out and really kind of, like, act out and want to, and it really is, like, searching for answers in that way. He's very determined to get to the bottom of things, and I think that's something that, you really do gravitate towards when it comes to Mark as a character. There are a lot of things that Mark just doesn't know about, and he seems at first pretty content with not really knowing. He kind of just wants to focus on his work. He takes a lot of pride into it. He seems to enjoy, like, his coworkers and whatnot. He likes the environment, but as the show goes on, you can see the gears in his head really do start to turn, and he really does start to question, why have these things been kept in me? Are there other things that I should know about that are much bigger than work that, maybe I haven't been, that have been locked away? And you can see that he really does kind of start becoming a lot more anxious and wanting to search for those answers. And that's really when those two sides really do converge, because you contrast that with the Audi Mark, who has a very specific reason as to why he signed up for this program, and you can see that that's taken a bit of a toll on him in the real world. And I thought that they just did such an incredible job with giving us such a three-dimensional character here. It does take a while for Mark to get to the place that you want him to, but I think that's what makes him such an interesting character, is really just the evolution that he goes through just in this first season. Makes me so intrigued to see what else they're going to do with him moving forward. However, like I said before, for me, the character I did gravitate towards the most is the character of Helly. And my god, this character is put through the fucking ringer this season. I mean, this is someone who, right from the beginning, is, like I said, just kind of thrust into this environment. She doesn't really want to be here, and she's constantly trying to look for ways to get out. She doesn't like the way that things are, you know, she doesn't like the conduct that, you know, Lumen is giving her. She doesn't like the rules and things like that. There's so many things that she wants to change, and that character was just so interesting to me, especially when we started to dive deeper into who she is on the outside of things. I mean, she really just becomes so interesting throughout. There are so many directions that they take her that I just wasn't really expecting, and I just think through all of it, you know, she kind of feels like the audience in this scenario. We're thrown into this and we don't really want anything to do with it. It's eerie, it's making us uncomfortable, and you feel kind of trapped in that way. And Helly is in a very similar situation where she wants to do everything in her power to get out of this, but she knows that she can't. And, you know, you can see throughout the show just the frustration, the fear, all of that just building up around her, and I thought she, for me, was easily the most interesting character. The character that I also thought is that a lot of people are going to latch onto, I think, is the character of Irving, played by John Turturro. He is someone who... He, you know, is very big about company policy. He wants to follow the rules. He's very big about that. But there's an unexpected direction with him going on with Christopher Walken's character. These two start to form this bond of sorts, and you really do find yourself latching onto it. It ends up becoming maybe the heart of the entire show, and I really liked what they ended up doing with both of those characters. I wasn't expecting to get quite as attached as I really was, but I thought it really did work with what they ended up doing with both of them here. Even a character like Dylan, who, like I said, he kind of starts off and he's just the comedic relief. He's the guy who's very lighthearted. He's always trying to think about the benefits and things like that of work, you know, of Lumen and whatnot. Even he goes through a lot more than you're expecting when we start to realize, you know, what his life is like on the outside. And he starts to become more aware of it as well. I just really loved what they ended up doing with him as a character. I think each one of these characters, you know, everyone, we at least get a window into who they are. Even if we don't go into depth with some of them, I thought we got enough to really just latch onto everyone throughout the show. By the end of the season, you know, I really felt like I knew who these people were. I wanted to know more. I want to know more of where the show is going to go with them. And I think overall, all these characters are just so compelling, and people you just really are latching onto in this scenario that, you know, they're part of this scenario that they can barely comprehend. Some of them don't even want to be a part of it, but it's the way that they go about it and the way that they kind of shift throughout the season, their mood changes and things like that. That's what really latches you onto these characters. And in the center of that, of course, you have Harmony Cobell, who is such a compelling villain because she is so motivated. You can see how dedicated she is to Lumen, to the cause, but you know that there's more to her than meets the eye. And, you know, the deeper we get into her character, the more we start to realize a lot of what she's really doing, how unethical, you know, she's been and things like that. I just really liked what they ended up doing with her. I think all the characters are just super well written in this show. But it also should be noted, this is easily one of the most unpredictable shows that I have seen in quite a bit. There were so many points throughout the season where I'm like, I have it figured out. I know exactly what they're doing here. And then they would throw a curveball, and it just changed everything I thought I knew about the show. And I mean that in the best way possible. There are so many jaw-dropping moments throughout this show, and it wasn't just like, oh, this is just really, you know, it wasn't like shock value or things like that. They all felt earned. These all felt like things that did make sense by the end, but we just didn't really think about, and it only deepened my interest in the show. I already was very invested at this point, but these revelations that we end up getting, really just, I think, heighten the level of intrigue, heighten the level of suspense that you already will have for this show. And I thought they did such an excellent job with that. That's something I really did love throughout this show. Each one of these characters have some kind of past that's tied to them. Each one of them have a motive for why they are a part of Lumen. They have a reasoning for it. And, the more the show goes on, the more we start to realize what's actually the reasoning. And I thought that's what really made these characters so interesting. Even the ones that maybe we don't dive as deep into this season, I felt was still given enough to where I am very much I very much feel attached to them. I feel like I can get invested in their characters, and I really like what they end up doing overall. And the world building of Lumen as well, I thought, is very well done here. The show does a really good job at kind of thrusting you into this world, kind of like how Helly is. And seeing again the way that all of these, the way that management acts, they're constantly trying to provide some sort of, they're trying to make Severance seem like a positive, this safe haven of sorts. This place that's going to help them out, but you can always tell there's some deception behind it. And when we start to realize just a lot of the things that they have been responsible for, this show gets that much more interesting. And from the beginning, there is intrigue within this show, but the more this goes on, the more it starts to become, honestly, more of a horror show than anything. When you start to realize the deception of Lumen, what their actual intent is, what's really going on behind the scenes, it becomes that much more, terrifying to think about, that someone would ever, subject themselves to something like this. And I thought they just did such an amazing job with that. But also the themes of the show, I think, are very palpable throughout this season. A lot of the show, you can obviously say it's about how we cope with grief, because that's something a lot of these characters are going through in various ways. Or also, a lot of it, I think, is about emotional repression. A lot of these characters have gone through a lot of hardship within their life, and they are taking this role at Lumen to kind of take their mind away from it, quite literally take their mind away from it. And I think this show really kind of shows how suffocating that can be. As much as you try to push away from that emotional repression, it's always going to come back to haunt you, and it's going to bottle up inside of you until you just can't take it anymore. You just need to release it. There's a scene in this show, I think, that perfectly exemplifies that, and I think that's a very big theme of this show. But that's really only scratching the surface, I think, of just how complex this show really is. I think the show has a lot to say about the way people are treated at work, abuse that they go through, the way they're expected to act versus how they should act, just because you're told to do something, should you follow the rules and things like that. I thought all of that was just really well presented throughout this show. With a lot of these characters, we are seeing the mundanity of their lives. Things are very repetitive in that way, and it's at first very cold to watch, because you're watching a lot of characters just kind of go about their day in the same way, not really questioning much about it. But eventually we start to see, that switch happen. We start to see them start to question things a lot more. And, that's when this show really becomes something special. And I mean, from the beginning it is, but I think once the show starts to dive deeper into, what's really going on there, why everyone has taken on this kind of lifestyle, I think the show really becomes something amazing in that way. And that's really when I was just so impressed by how much this show is really able to accomplish over. And the lives of the Audis that we do get, like I said, for some of these characters, we don't get to see a lot of it. Primarily, we're seeing Mark, but I think his Audi life is just as interesting as his Innie life, because you kind of get to see the part of himself that he's constantly hiding within work, and you start to see why he might do that, and you want to see where this character is going to go, because obviously he has no memories of what he just went through the previous day, and so you're kind of wondering, where is he really headed? And when you start to get a sense of where he's really headed, and the changes that his life has kind of undergone. I think his character is that much more interesting in that way, and I really loved what they end up doing. And again, I think they're able to balance both lives very well in this show. So again, I think the writing here is just absolutely spectacular. I think they just do such a great job with what they're trying to get across. It has such an interest, so much ambition as well, that a lot of shows just wouldn't dare to go to in their first season. I think the show really does go for it, and that's something I really did appreciate. But the cinematography in the show is something else I really do want to talk about. The show is such a specific visual style, specifically in scenes with Lumen. The show is purposefully, Lumen itself, it's set in this very boring, like, white and gray background, and you feel kind of trapped there. You don't really want to be here because it's so, like, boring to watch, but yet you can't take your eyes off of it. You want to see these characters and what they're going through, and I think the way they, design Lumen and things like that, you can understand why someone would want, it looks like this office, but yet something just looks so much more boring, so much more, drab in that way, and I thought that they just did a really good job when it came to the cinematography in the show, and then contrasting that with, like, the lives of the Audis and things like that. There's a lot of stunning shots throughout the show, just a lot of great stuff they play around with in terms of cinematography, and it's not just the office itself. I mean, there are a lot of shots that go into some really trippy directions, and that's something I wasn't expecting them to do, the cinematography, and I really did love that. The score as well to the show is fantastic. I absolutely adore the intro. It's probably one of my favorites that I've seen in quite a bit, and I love how that intro is a lot of the time, a part of the show. They'll use that background music a lot, and it's, the da-da-da-da-da, like, it really just plays, it really just heightens the mystery, the intrigue, all of that stuff. They do such a great job with when it comes to the score here. And I think the editing in this show is also really well done. I think every episode is very well paced. A lot of the episodes are only like 40 minutes long, but I never really felt like they were, I never really felt like they were doing a bad job when it came to telling the story. Nothing really felt rushed to me. Everything just felt very natural in that way, and I thought they did a really good job in terms of how they told the story. And this really is one of those shows where every episode just gets that much more interesting, culminating in what is easily one of the most nail-biting finales that I have watched in a long time. I mean, the show, honestly, is worth it just for the finale, which is just absolutely spectacular. It is every bit as intriguing. It is every bit as suspenseful. It is just absolutely, it is just an absolute thrill ride in that way, but it's also such an emotional one. I just really loved what they ended up doing in this show. But of course, we do have to get into the spoilers here, which, my god, there is a lot to discuss. The first thing I think I really want to talk about is a couple things with Mark. First thing I want to bring up is Petey. From the first episode, we've seen that Petey has mysteriously kind of just vanished. Mark suddenly has his position. Petey is not spoken about, and Mark's kind of okay with that, but you see within his Audi life that kind of starts to take form. Petey shows up. He kind of starts to give Mark a sense of what's really going on here, that there's a lot of deception going on within Lumen, that they are not, that they are not as good as they really say they are, and, I really like what they ended up doing with this character, because this is where Mark really starts to recognize that maybe this wasn't a great idea. Maybe I should not have, taken this. And while obviously he's very thrown off by what's going on, because he's never really seen this guy before, we see that Petey is someone who he started to realize, what was going on here. He started to realize the true negatives of Lumen, and just, you can see that it really started to, it really started to drive him into madness, and he wanted to kind of, like, reverse the Severance and things like that, and it ends up giving him, this really bad sickness, and he's, like, playing all these recordings of himself, and it's this apology that he has to read with, like, Milicic telling him to, like, repeat the lines. That whole thing was so incredible to watch, because at that point, we are so unaware of what's actually going on, but we can just see the toll that it has taken on this character. And by seeing what's happened to Petey, we are that much more concerned about what's going to happen to the characters that are still alive within this show. You know, how much is this going to affect them? What is the true extent that Lumen is willing to go to keep these people around? We get the sense in the show that there is a group that is kind of like protesting Lumen, understands how unethical a lot of what they're doing really is. And I think what we get a sense of in the show, they are desperate to keep these people around. They want to stay relevant. They want this process to work, even if they know it doesn't work as well as it should. Even if they've seen the effects of what it can do to people, they still want to keep them around. And I think we very much do see that within this show, and I think that's something we are going to dive deeper into within the second season overall. But I really do think everything with Petey we get here kind of is like the inciting incident for everything else that happens within the show. But the other big part of Mark's storyline I really want to talk about is obviously the reasoning why he has decided to sever. I kept this out of the review initially because I don't know if it's stated within a trailer or things like that. But we do find out very early on that Mark's wife has passed away. He used to be this teacher of sorts, and he's kind of put all of that on the back burner just because of this grief, and you can see how hard it is for him to kind of cope with this. He is now severing himself so that way he doesn't have to think about it, but it's what they decided to do with this that I found such an interesting idea, with him, still being in the thick of it, really grieving his wife's death, also trying to be there for his sister who is going through, her own childbirth and things like that. But, as the show goes on and Mark starts to, recognize, what's really happening, when we eventually got that twist about his wife, who we presume to be dead, and it turns out that Miss Casey actually has been his wife all along, holy shit, I was not expecting them to go in that direction. Even for a second, that's not something I could have ever expected them to do, but it's the genius of the show that they were able to throw me for a loop like that. And it really changes, you already have these very negative feelings about Lumen and just a lot of the fucked up shit that they're doing. But the fact that they hid this from Mark for so long, that his wife is very clearly alive, did she, it begs you to question, did she actually die? Did they do this as a way to bring Mark into the severed program? Is that the reason why Harmony, Cobell is so intent on being very invasive towards Mark's family, which everything she does as Mrs. Selvig is so creepy to watch, because you can always tell there's some ulterior motive behind it. But just that whole reveal, it just changes so much, because now you realize that his wife isn't dead. She's very much alive, and you wonder what the whole process was in them doing that. And we still don't really know what's actually going on there, but that whole twist I thought was such an interesting idea. And again, they did such a great job of building it up throughout the show, where there seemed to be holes within the story. We didn't really know a lot about what actually happened to his wife, and I like that they showed that it wasn't quite as simple as we thought it was, and I think that really changes, so many things within this show. I think for the rest of this show, Mark's goal is going to be to get to the bottom of this, to figure out what the hell happened to his wife. Why would they ever keep something from this like him? I'm very interested in seeing how that all really does play out, and I thought they did such an excellent job when it came to revealing that twist. But what's even more curious to me is what happens in the next episode when Cobell is scheduling Mark for these wellness appointments with Miss Casey, who he's regularly gone to throughout the show, and they don't recognize each other as husband and wife, obviously, and she's really disappointed. Again, you're just kind of wondering what is her goal here? What is she really trying to do? And that's something I like about this first season, is we still don't fully know what her goal is here. What is the deeper picture behind all of this. It seems like she just wants to gain control of everyone. It seems like that's what she wants to do because, you know, she, like I said, she's very invasive with, like, Mark's, you know, sister and things like that, always checking up on them. You know, she goes as far as to, you know, tend to, like, Devin's baby and things like that. You know, she's supporting Mark, his outie, when he says that he wants to quit. You're just really kind of questioning, like, what is she really trying to get at here? And I thought that's something that I'm very interested in seeing explored throughout the rest of this show. But with that said, let's talk about Helly, because, my god, some of the directions they take this character, I truly was not expecting. So, the first few episodes, like I said, she clearly doesn't want to be here at all. She's constantly escaping. She's getting reprimanded for it. She has to keep repeating the same thing over and over again, similar to how Petey repeated the same thing. And there's this moment where, you know, she thinks that she can try to get her outie to basically request her to leave. She just doesn't want to deal with this anymore. She doesn't like the way things are going. It's off-putting to her. She doesn't want to be in this environment. And the moment where her outie tells her that, like, you know, you don't get to decide this, I'm in control at all times, I just felt so heartbroken for Helly. I felt so upset for her. And this is really the moment where I realized, like, Helly's probably my favorite character, because you understand, like, how much she doesn't want this, and how she has to continue to subjecting herself to this life that she just doesn't really want to be a part of, and it's just really devastating to watch. But my god, the moment at the end of the episode where it seemed that Helly committed suicide, I thought she was a goner. I really did. I did not think that she was going to survive that, but it's the fact that she does end up surviving that. And not only does she survive that, but Cobell does not give any sort of, Cobell completely just brushes this under the rug. She doesn't tell, you know, the board about it or anything like that. This is eventually why she's suspended from her position at the end of the show, which it seems like she's pretty much going rogue at this point. But what they ended up doing with Helly, I truly wasn't expecting, and I really love where her character ends up going after this, where, you know, she's now that much more determined to fully expose Lumen in that way, and I'm very interested in seeing, you know, what they're really going to end up doing with her throughout the rest of this show. But also, let's talk about Irving, because his whole storyline is also so interesting to think about. You know, he starts to become close with this character, Bert. He is someone who is the head of the optics and design department, and Bert is someone who, it seems like he's at a point where he's going to retire, and these two become very close to the point of it becoming a romantic relationship. And I really loved what they did with this, because it seems like, despite the fact that you can tell that Irving and Bert are very clearly in love with each other, they have this connection, Bert wants nothing, like, Bert doesn't want anyone to really acknowledge this whatsoever. He's constantly, like, brushing it off. He's constantly telling everyone that they're just friends. So it seems like Lumen has very strict rules about, like, feelings, like any sort of emotional attachment. That's not something that you can have. And I'm interested in seeing what that is all really about. Why did Bert react in that way? You know, I think there's definitely more going on than we think, because we can see that Irving, you know, he's very determined to, he's very much adamant about making this relationship work. He wants this to be a thing. Bert makes him happy, and like I said, I think they kind of are like the heart of the show in that way. And in the handbook, it directly states, like, you cannot take a heart to other employees, and that's what really kind of brings this sadness to Irving and Bert, because these are two people that generally do love each other. That moment in episode 6 especially, where they are, you know, they're standing in that plant-filled room, and Irving apologizes to Bert because he wasn't really ready for, like, their first kiss in that way, and, you know, they talk about how they just want to stay with each other. I mean, it's generally really beautiful to watch, and you really do root for this couple, but yet you know that they're doing this against all odds, and I think Irving is ready to take that jump, but Bert just simply isn't. Bert is too committed to Lumen. He's done this for a while. This is something that matters a lot to him, and it seems like he isn't really ready to take that jump yet. And we can see that, we can see that Lumen, again, is very strict about their rules and things like that. But no matter what happens, like, these two love each other, and I'm very interested in seeing, are they going to be able to prevail? Are they going to be able to successfully, have this relationship that both of them clearly care so much about and want to invest all this time into? Seeing these two, connect with each other and things like that, it's just really beautiful to watch, and I'm very interested in seeing how that's all going to play out moving forward. And also, a big part of that is that we see in the penultimate episode, Helly kisses Mark. It seems like Helly's starting to gain a bit of an attraction to Mark as well, and that also violates, Severance's rules and things like that. So, again, I'm interested in seeing how is this really going to play out. Is there going to be any blowback from that? Is Lumen going to find out what happened? Like, it's going to be interesting to see what really ends up going down with everything. And, with how great all of these characters were written, the one flaw I was having throughout a good portion of the show was Dylan. It's not like I didn't enjoy his character. Like I said, I certainly liked just how, compared to everyone else, he was the one that, remained positive. He was obsessed with, this waffle party and things like that, which, eventually he ends up getting. But the moment that really did strike me and made me realize that he actually is, a way better character than I was giving him credit for, is the moment where Milchick is having all of them do, basically participate in this dance party, and Dylan outwardly doesn't want to participate. He revolts against Milchick. He starts screaming at him and saying that he wants to have memories of his child being born. And you start to realize that that's the reason why Dylan was severed, because something ended up happening with his children. And though we don't get to see Outie Dylan in this season, I'm sure we will be getting a closer look at him within season 2. This was such an amazing moment, though, because it really just changed this character in such an amazing way for me, because it kind of feels like, yeah, that's what Tillman was doing, but also feels like it was kind of all of a front. He was starting to realize, just how corrupt Lumen was, and something that was taken away from him, and becoming aware of it was just an amazing moment. The way he just snaps at Milchick in an instant there. Zach Cherry just did such an amazing job in that scene, and I'm very excited to see what we end up getting with him throughout the rest of the show, and hopefully get more scenes like that one. But, of course, this does eventually lead them to find the overtime contingency, where they realize before then that basically Lumen has all of them under surveillance. They're, watching their every move. But the way that they complete the switch is through this overtime contingency. If they are able to, hit the, click the right buttons and things like that, they're able to do it. Dylan is the one who has access to it. So they do decide to undergo this process where they are essentially going to wake up their outies. And that leads to such an insane finale. Everything we get within this last episode is just perfection. It's so utterly satisfying to watch, because it does such an excellent job of, kind of wrapping up the arcs that we've been getting, but also creating new ones in that way. For Mark, him coming to the realization first that Devin isn't his wife, that his wife is very much alive, that he went to Lumen as a way to kind of, soften the burden of losing his wife in that way, and that Devin wasn't really as encouraging as it seemed like she was. Is such an interesting moment to watch. And the moment where he also realizes that Mrs. Selvig is Cobell is insane to watch. And Devin's reaction to all of that seems like she's going to get a lot more involved in season 2, which I'm all here for, because I really like Devin as a character, but obviously she's been a little bit more on the sidelines, and it seems like next season she's going to be a lot more out on front. And I'm excited to see what they really end up doing with her, especially the way things wrap up with Mark essentially telling her that his wife is alive. He doesn't get to say it because, unfortunately, the switch ends up ending before he can say who he's talking about. But him saying she was alive, I think it's pretty obvious that Devin knows that Devin knows who he's referring to. So I'm very much intrigued to see how that does play out. But then coupling that with Irving, who we're kind of led to believe that Irving and Burt might be a couple outside of this show, and we realize that's not the case. Irving lives almost in complete seclusion. He's constantly drawing these pictures of, like, some black corridor, which we keep seeing that throughout the show. It's a very interesting motif, and I'm not entirely sure what that's going to lead to, but when he makes that switch, his entire focus is trying to find Burt, and he does find Burt, and, you know, Burt's outie is with another man. When he's pounding on the door, you know, trying to get Burt to recognize him, and to no avail. It was just so devastating to watch, because we know how much this means to Irving, and the fact that he can't even be with Burt as an outie. I think that's something that Irving was really banking on. He was hoping that maybe there is a life in which him and Burt know each other, and they have a relationship, and they're able to be, you know, intimate with each other and not have to be as secretive about it. But the fact that it's the complete opposite, I think that just weighs a much heavier toll on Irving for sure. So again, I don't really know how he's going to recover from that. But of course, the biggest reveal of sorts is with Helly, or should I say Helena, who we find out not only was she basically signed up for Lumen because she was the chosen one of sorts, which we keep hearing about in the show. They keep saying to Helly, like, you know, you're the person that's going to get us through this, you're the chosen one, and things like that. We realize what that's all about. She actually is the daughter of the person that pretty much founded Lumen Industries, and this changes a lot. It makes sense why Helena would have never gone through, would have never approved of Helly's, you know, resignation notice. She never would have done that because this matters way too much to her. And there's that moment where Helly is about to expose Lumen, and she does start to do that, but of course that's when the whole switch happens, and just the way all of that culminated is so interesting. It was just so nail-biting television. I mean, I was so glued to the screen, not knowing what was going to happen next, when Milichik is, like, pounding on the door, trying to get Dylan to stop this, and at first he's, like, trying to appeal to his emotions, trying to, you know, do what Dylan used to respond to, him giving him all of these benefits, but Dylan's not gonna do that anymore. He wants answers. He wants to remember his children being born. He doesn't want to have to go through this anymore, and it seems like now, knowing what they tried to do, things are going to get a lot more hellish for these characters. If they weren't already, things are going to get a lot more severe. And I don't really know where we're going to head after this. I think that both sides are going to collide in a very interesting way. We know we have this group that is outrightly protesting, you know, everything going on within Lumen, so I'm very interested in seeing how all of that does end up coming together. But my god, this finale, I have not been this eager for a season 2 of television in quite some time. I cannot wait to see how everything ends up playing out here. How's Devin gonna react to this revelation that, holy shit, Mark's wife is actually alive? How is Helly gonna kind of reconcile with the fact that outside of this, she actually is basically the you know, she's the daughter of the founder of everything, even though she wants nothing to do with it whatsoever? How's Irving gonna come to terms with the fact that even his outie is alone? And is there any way to be able to expose Lumen for who they really are, really expose the evil going on within this corporation? You know, I'm very interested in seeing how all that does play out. There's so much potential, and I'm just so happy they were able to get that season 2. I'm happy the show was able to get the audience that it really does deserve, because I think there's so many interesting things and so many game-changing revelations that we have here, and I really am excited to see how all of them pay off in such an interesting manner. I'm so excited to see what ends up happening within the rest of the show. But overall, guys, Severance really did blow me away in so many different aspects. It combines this sense of horror, this sense of suspense, this sense, but also somehow implements dark comedy in there. It has one of the most compelling premises that I've ever seen, that also has so much to say about grief and emotional repression in such an interesting way. So many amazing performances, especially from Adam Scott, Britt Lauer, John Turturro, Christopher Walken, and Patricia Arquette especially. They really are. Also Tramell, Tillman. They really are the standouts of this entire season. It's such an unpredictable show. There's so many revelations that I don't think anyone's really going to expect, but it really just heightened my level, my love for this show overall. It's so ambitious. It's so endlessly creative in what they decide to do, and it ends in a way that makes me so anxious to see how everything does play out from here. Look, in a world where entertainment is mostly driven by, like, IP entertainment, in a world where entertainment is mostly driven by constant IPs and endless sequels and remakes and things like that, it's just really great to see a show like this that is truly original. It's not based off of anything. It's an original idea. We really have no idea where it is going to go. It's such a interesting premise, and it really does deliver in that way. There's so much the show opens up in terms of possibilities, and I really don't know where it's going to head from here. It's easily one of the most intriguing shows that I've seen in a very long time, and it's a show that I wasn't expecting to get as swept up emotionally as I really did. But the more the show went on, the more I just really ended up loving everything that it was trying to do. I think this very much is going to turn out to be Apple TV Plus's, like, flagship show. I know they were struggling for a bit, but they really are improving in an amazing way. I think this is the show that they've needed for a very long time now. I hope that they recognize how incredible this show really is. I mean, you could say Ted Lasso as well, but I think in terms of, like, serious dramas, like, this is definitely that show for them. It's a show that I think a lot of people are just not going to be prepared for, but it's one that is really going to leave such a big impact. It has such a distinctive voice and vision, and I cannot wait to see where else it really does go moving forward. Severance really was everything I wanted to be, and I am going to give it an A+. I cannot stress enough how much you guys need to check out this show. I mean, this really is something that is unlike anything I've seen in quite a bit. But that's it for my review of the first season of Severance. Let me know what you guys saw of this show overall. Left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.